We are now live on YouTube. And everybody will be getting started in just a few moments, about 2 minutes. All right, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started for the evening. Welcome to week 4 of Apple App Development. As usual, I'm Michael Dowies, and I have Taylor Arndt with me today. Hi, Taylor. I guess you can't get unmuted yet. And we have Becky Knobb, who is our host for the evening. Hi, Becky.
Hi, Michael.
All right. So this is going to be a little bit of a... Okay, thanks, Taylor.
Sorry about that.
No problem. This is going to be a different format for the class today. I'm going to be driving as we go through the screen shares and things like that. As I said last week, we'll be changing some things up. And we'll see how things go. If we need to do things differently, we will do them differently. Typically, we will have code samples before the class, but the reason why I did not today is because I was not sure how far we were going to get into this. Okay, so we have a lot on the agenda for this evening, and so we're going to go into kind of the history of app development. What is Swift? What are some basic programming concepts you're going to need? And we're going to write some basic Swift code with print and variables, and we'll see how far we get with that. We may get into some other areas that I planned on covering next week, so we'll see where we go. But as we typically do, I want to see if we have any questions about the previous content before we get started today. So if you have questions from before, raise your hand.
All right. As of right now, there are no raised hands.
Okay.
There is a raised hand now, Jim.
Hi, Jim.
Hey, Michael, I actually had a question about one of the exam questions.
Okay.
My memory and Google seem to think that it was Command Y that toggled the debugger, but that wasn't one of the options you had selected. So can you tell us the difference between Command Y and I think it was Command D or Command Z? I forget what it was, but do
Command
you,
Shift C.
yeah, whatever the answer is that you had on the test.
Okay.
Can you talk to that, Taylor?
Yeah, so I know that really where I was going, and maybe I should have changed the order of the question, so I apologize if it was unclear. But where I was trying to go here is to how to get to the debug console. So that Command Shift C is what you're looking for, but maybe I should have changed the wording on that. And if that is the case, I will go ahead and change that because maybe it was unclear.
Well, I'm not too worried about this. I'm not too worried about my score, but I am just asking about the difference between Command Shift C and Command Y.
I'm not sure what Command Y does, so I'm not
Oh.
sure.
Me there.
Okay.
Because there's the debug console, and then there's the debug. There's the debug navigators, which is, I believe, Command. Was it 5?
That's the issue navigator.
Yeah, issue navigator. Yep.
Yeah, I was mainly
Um,
going for the console there, but maybe I should have changed the wording.
Yep. So we could change that for future students, but yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, we have Kevin.
Kevin?
Hello. So my question was, what's the easiest way to save the documents that you two post in Google Classroom to my Mac?
So I know when you open a document in Google Classroom on the Mac, we can't really go through this here with VoiceOver, but you can. I know there's like a share, but like it might be easier to do it through the iPhone app because there's a share button where you can then open it and save it wherever you want. There's also buttons in the Classroom website on Mac where you can tell it to save. You just got to dig through some menus a little more to do that.
Yeah, I kind of played with those. I was hoping there's something easier.
No, Classroom kind of makes it where they expect you to open things in Google Docs and things like that. It's a little bit more complicated, but there is a way to tell it to save on the Mac. It's not the easiest thing to get it to save, even if you set it as a Word document. So again, that's just one of the caveats of every platform has its strengths and weaknesses. Where we had our content before, it was very much more difficult compared to where we have it now.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, and as right now there are no more raised hands.
All right. All right, folks. So,
But Michael, there is a chat if you want that.
okay. There is
And
a chat.
it's from Jim.
Okay.
And he says in Xcode, Shift plus Command Y is the keyboard shortcut used to show and hide the debug area.
Okay. And there's
So to be
there's
clear,
two
I just
things.
cut and pasted that from Google, and I was sort of curious what it meant. Sorry, Michael. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So let me actually expand on that a little more. Okay. So there's and I should have talked more about this in class. There is the debug area can be multiple things. You could have the debug area and the debug console. I believe the debug console is part of the debug area. And the debug console is kind of like where your prints and all of your logs are kept. But you could show other things in the debug area beyond just what's in your console. And I think that that's kind of where some confusion lies. in how Xcode works. All right. So let's talk about the history of Apple app development. So, of course, there have been apps for Apple platforms since, we had Mac OS 9, 8, and, so on. But where this really changed was when Mac OS and Steve Jobs' operating system, Next Step or Next OS, came together. This was in the early 2000s that they started implementing all of these things. But we really didn't have a lot of cohesion until like Mac OS 10.3, 10.4. That's kind of where all modern app development stems from. When we talk about app development, we're talking about building apps for what used to be the Next operating system, so Next OS. And what they ended up doing is they built in support for compatibility with previous versions of Mac OS. So they built in compatibility for Mac OS 9 apps, which they, I believe, removed in the process. But we had, for a while, we had compatibility between both sets of code bases. Next OS was Steve Jobs' company that he was working for before he came back to Apple. When they merged and Apple purchased Next, Steve brought the Next team in to basically be to create Mac OS and what we now know as iOS and iPad OS and everything else. So all of that is derived from the Next operating system. In 2007, Apple created the iPhone and built a touch-first architecture when they built the iPhone and then eventually the iPad. This means that touch targets were bigger, so instead of being clickable areas, things were made to where they would look or work well under finger presses instead of just mouse movements. This is where Apple deviated a lot from Windows because Windows built a whole nother operating system based on Windows. Well, I guess it's very similar. They both, Windows Phone was based off Windows, and Apple built iOS. At the time, it was iPhone OS. When that came out, there was not really a way to build apps for the touch-based platforms. So there was no way to build apps for iOS whenever we got the first iPhone, even really the second one when we got the 3G. But a lot of very creative people got together and figured out how to jailbreak the iPhone, and they built alternative app stores. And then we started hearing about this library called UIKit. UIKit is how you would build apps for iOS platforms, and how the built-in apps on the iPhone were created. On the Mac, we already knew we had this thing called AppKit, AppKit. And if you look at a lot of the functionality on macOS that's written in AppKit, you will see the abbreviation of NS. So at the time, you had NSString, you had, oh man, I forgot about NSString. That's been a long time ago. You had things like NSButton, NSApplication, NS this and that. And that stood for Next Step. And it still does. You can still find that throughout Mac OS. And so that's kind of why I gave that bit of a history lesson. So then when we started to get the iOS apps that we were creating, we started, because it was based off of UIKit, we would get UI button, UI menu, UI application, UI this, UI that, UI navigation controller, UI view controller. And so it was very much a delineated area of what operating system you are programming for. Even though a lot of these things did the same things, it's good to know what is supported on which version of the operating system. When we built apps for these platforms, we used a language called Objective-C. Objective-C was a C++ and C, well, more C style language that used a very interesting syntax. You didn't write code to run functions. You wrote sentences in a very interesting structure, and you should look up some Objective-C and be baffled about the syntax for that. It's almost kind of like something like application would be the initial thing, and then UI application, and then you do a colon, and then you'd say, it would be like you're finishing a sentence. Did finish launching, and then the argument would be with options, and then you would have your options for finishing for the function. You would have UI application did enter background, did enter foreground, and that is how you would declare functions and even run them. It was a very interesting way of writing code for Apple. And of course, because it was based off C, you had to use very interesting syntax and ways to do what you needed to. You had to worry about what variables you had allocated. And if you closed the screen, you had to deallocate your variables. You had to use garbage collection to remove variables. And then they added where you didn't have to do that. And there's so many things now that we take for granted that we did not have when iOS development even started, because it was based off of AppKit. Now we get a lot of these things for free that we got with that we did not get when we started this. Okay. In about 2014, Apple introduced the Swift programming language, and it's open source. And it allows you to, it's a modernized language where you don't have to use the C style code structure that you used before, like semicolons aren't required. You don't have to use what's called, you don't have to type, you don't have to use strict typing to create your variables. You can, but you don't have to. There's a lot more that can be done. You could use type inferencing, so you could just say, let name equals double quote Michael, double quote, and it knows what kind of variable it is. It's very similar to Python in that way. And there's many other things as well that you don't have to worry about compared to Objective-C. Okay. So we went that direction. And then I think it's around 2019, Apple started introducing what's called Swift UI, which then changed the dynamic of how we build our user interfaces. Because the problem is that we have a lot of operating systems. We have iPhone, we have iPad, we have Mac, we have Apple Watch, we have Apple TV, we have Apple Vision Pro now. We have, I think that's all of them, unless I'm missing something. But we've got a lot of operating systems here, guys. So would you really ask developers to develop specific UI and code for each user interface? No. That's why we have the multi-platform selector. We can pick multiple platforms and write one code base and just adapt the interface on the different platforms that we're presenting our code on. And that's where Swift UI came in. And we'll do some comparisons between the two, UIKit and Swift UI, as the class goes on, so you could see the differences. But it's important to know that when Swift UI came out, it was groundbreaking for Apple platforms because you could write on one and get it on any platform for the most part. The problem was, I should say, that Swift UI was not developed very well. It wasn't fully cooked. It needed a little more time in the oven. So it took several years for Swift UI to be even fully developed to be viable to be used full-time in apps. In other words, a lot of times we would have to dip back into those initial UIKit and AppKit implementations just to get things to work. Like, for example, what if I wanted to set the background color of a tab bar and change the tab item colors? You couldn't do that with Swift UI. What if I wanted a web view? I couldn't do that with Swift UI until fairly recently. They just didn't have it fully baked. And so that's kind of what we had to deal with while they worked on it. But Apple has greatly improved much of what you could do with Swift UI. They have already depreciated several things that they originally had in Swift UI, even though it's so new. But it's finally ready for primetime use, and it is more. It is recommended that you start an app with Swift UI instead of using what's called UIKit. Now, why pick Swift UI over UIKit or AppKit? Well, I already said multi-platform, but also if you are a screen reader user, Swift UI is infinitely more accessible. And the reason why I say that is everything is done by writing code. You do not, in UIKit, you could do that as well. But a lot of people would write code for that through what's called storyboards, where you can drag and drop items onto a canvas and create your UI. Okay. That's not very effective for blind users. We had a thing called auto layout and constraints that we had to deal with. Look, I used my vision to do that, and I still wasn't very good at it. I did not like auto layout and constraints. It was difficult for me to use. Okay. So Swift UI levels the playing field for all Apple developers. You write more code, but it's easier to figure out what you're doing in the end if you can read a Swift UI file and know what it does. Okay. Let's go ahead and stop for a minute, and I want to take any questions about what was talked about before we move on.
All right, so far there are no raised hands. Oh, Fenton has a hand raised.
Fenton, go ahead. You're still muted.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, sounds like Swift UI is the way to go. But how about the rest of the adaptation? What's the ratio there? Do people generally accept that approach? You know, cited or unsighted wise?
Great
What's your
question.
thought? Yeah.
Great question. So I guess your question is, does the main industry of Apple, of developers use Swift UI? Is that an acceptable implementation at this stage? Absolutely. Swift UI is getting all of the new features built by Apple, and while UIKit does get some updates still, it is not getting nearly the amount of new features and design patterns that you get with Swift UI. Okay.
All right, so we've got Kevin with a hand raised.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Where to go? So I was going to say that way back in 2010, I tried to take a iOS development class, and that was way before Swift, and I didn't even get to Hello World because Interface Builder was inaccessible, and all the code you had to write back in Objective-C to get Hello World displayed like Taylor did in week 1 was insane. So that never worked out for me. And there's a podcast called ATP, Accidental Tech Podcast, that might be fun for some of you. And in there, sometimes Marco Arment, who wrote Overcast, and John Siracusa, they'll talk about where they really like Swift UI or where it's still half baked and interesting stuff. And when Apple announced Swift in 2014, I was at a WWDC party here in Madison with a now retired professor, Eric Knapp. And when they announced Swift, Eric said, "Can I go home now?"
I think I follow him online. So, yeah, Swift is something else. You will learn that it has its great moments and its annoying moments. I'm looking at you, optionals. But it is a wonderful language to work with compared to many others.
All right, and Jim has his hand raised.
Right, Jim?
Hey, Michael, do we know how accessible the code is that Swift UI generates?
How accessible, like, its outcome is?
Yeah. Do we expect it runs with VoiceOver out of the box?
Yes. There are caveats though, but those are user created issues. Anything like there are ways you can make buttons without voiceover text, and that is not the fault of the of Swift UI itself. It is the fault of the developer for not putting an associated text along with it.
Well, I think that's my question. How much did this developer have to do, and how much is done by Swift UI using context clues and stuff that it knows about to build an accessible interface?
Again, it just depends on how you write your code. You can write it to be inaccessible, or you can write it to be accessible. And that goes for anything that you do. So it just depends on, like if I create a button and I tell it label, which is one of the arguments, and I just give it an image for the label, it's not going to be accessible. But if I give it a label and a text element in the label, then it will be accessible. Does that make sense?
So Swift UI will allow you to do things like an image label without text.
Yes.
For good reason?
It's supposed to be as versatile as the user wants it to be. Was
Okay.
the goal.
Okay.
Not sure what, and you could see this in Apple's apps too, right? Like Shortcuts was rewritten in Swift UI. And I'm working with Apple on labeling many buttons in the Shortcuts app that either A, have wrong labels, or B, have no labels and just say button because somebody didn't look at how they created the button in Swift UI. We got one bug fixed based on feedback that I've sent them, and I'll be sending them a lot more. But it is very evident that if you don't think about what you're doing when you're writing Swift UI, you can make inaccessible code, and we will demonstrate that in the class. Okay. Any other hands before we get to moving on to the next area here?
At the moment, I am not finding any other hands.
Okay. All right, let's talk about programming. What is programming? Programming and coding are very similar things. When you write a program, you are writing a recipe. That's what you're doing. You're writing basically a step-by-step instruction set on how to do a thing. It just so happens that that thing may be a lot more complicated than a recipe, but you're really doing the same things. Okay. In programming, you're basically giving the computer instructions. That's really all we're doing here, is we're giving the computer instructions on how to do a thing. Okay. So you could think of it like that. It's nothing more complicated than that. When we write code, the computer looks at the code and executes it based on the first line of the code. And then it goes to the next line, then the next, then the next. Then we can change, we can think of it as like train tracks. The train's going down the track. Based on a certain condition, we can change the course of the train to go on different tracks. And you know, the funny thing is that they are called switches that does that. Switch statements. But we could also use if statements. If this is true, do this. If this is true, do this. If this equals this, do this. And we'll get into all of that. Okay? But basically, a program is just line by line by line of what to do. We have conditional logic. We can loop through things to repeat and base things on that. But it is all based on those lines of code. What do we do from one item to the next to the next? Now, as you'll find out today, we are going to be doing some very basic things with code. What we can do is print something to the screen with the print command, and we can do what's called writing variables. Okay, so printing something to the screen lets us just say, this is what we want the screen to show. And what we'll be doing with these playgrounds is we will be printing that content to the screen through the debug console. Okay. Now, the next concept that we're going to talk about is variables. So a lot of times what programs will need to do is store information. It's kind of like storing pieces of memory, you know, creating memory, like so you don't forget things. Programs need to do that too. Or say you have a text field and you need to get information from that text field. We would store that in a variable, right? Say you want to get a number. We can do that from a variable as well. And we can print all of that information on the screen. Now, in Swift, if you're building a command line tool, you can ask for input and things like that, like in other languages. We are not going to be doing that here today. We may do it another day. But we're going to talk about how to just use basic print and variables. Now, the print statement is what we call a function. So we can have functions that will take in information and output information. That is the point of a function. We will talk about that in a future class. But today, just know that print as a function will print information on the screen. Okay. Now, we'll talk about the different variable types in a minute, but the first one I want to leave you with is called the string. A string is a sequence of characters that are combined together to make a string of characters. So we can have 2 characters be a string, or we can have a book be a string. And that is not even counting in, if we have formatted strings, or however they are going to be. It's called an attributed string in Swift. We are not counting in how we would render HTML or Markdown, which we can do in Swift as well. So that's a string. We also have variables that are types of integers. We have content that can be floating point. I believe they're doubles in Swift. I don't have a need to use that many in Swift UI, but they do exist. And when you're using, doing pixel math and other things like that, if you do things like that, then you will need to know how to use decimal points in your code. So that is a thing. I find that I use the variable types that I use, the primitives, as they say, that are very basic variable types. I use strings, integers, arrays, and dictionaries, which we'll cover in detail in the class. But I use those the most in Apple app development. There's also a concept called enums that we'll get into, which is best for type checking. For example, I can write a string that says the day of the week is Monday, right? So I would have day equals double quote Monday double quote as a string. There's not a lot of type safety in that, because what if that string changes? So I could have days of the week as an enum and put Monday through or Sunday through Saturday as enum values. And it makes it a lot more, you can't mess it up as easy. So we'll cover enums because they will be important in Swift UI. But that's some of the main variable types that we'll cover in the class. Okay. Variables are just a way of storing information for later retrieval. And we can do 2 types of variables. We can set constants that say this variable cannot be changed, or also known in Apple's terms, immutable. Or we can have a variable that can change, and that's known as a mutable variable. Okay. So we have several areas there that we're going to be working on. Printing variables and the different ways to create them. Now, there's one other thing that we're going to talk about today, and that is, what if we want to put something in our code that we can read, but the computer cannot? And I'm going to say that these are called comments. These are called comments, and we have 2 types of those. A comment allows us to write in a document without the compiler seeing what we write. and I will demonstrate. We're going to start with comments first when we get started with code. Okay. So comments are very useful. We have two types. On one-line comments or inline comments, as they're also called, and multi-line comments. We'll talk about how to create those later. Okay. We have conditional logic, so if statements, switch statements, those things. We talked about those. So basically, we could do if a variable is this, do something. If a variable is that, do something else. Or we could have else, else if, and things like that. So these are all concepts that you will be learning throughout the class. These are just general programming concepts that you will be exposed to as we go along. And then there's what's called object-oriented programming, which will be classes and other ways of doing objects in Swift. We'll get into those things as time goes on, along with functions and other concepts that will be important. Okay. I think that's where I want to stop on programming concepts that we'll be talking about. Does anybody have any questions there?
All right, so far nothing, but I'll give them a couple of minutes.
And feel free to raise your hand if you're curious if Swift has a certain programming concept that we did not talk about. Okay.
No questions so far.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. Okay. So we're gonna do a few things at once. We're going to, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Again, I'm not going to be using VoiceOver. I'm going to be explaining what I'm doing, and I'm starting with a empty playground. Now, the point of this is so you can follow along and not have to hear my voiceover. I will explain what I'm doing as I do it without voiceover on. So give me just a second to get that going. I just wanted to check one thing, and we're good. Okay. I'm so used to sharing permission so other people can share. I went to the wrong button. Okay. Share, and I'm going to pick Xcode. Here we go. All right. So I've got a playground open, but I'm going to show you how you can do this. If you're just in the Xcode window, you can go to File, New, and then we can go to down to Playground. Once you pick Playground, then you can pick a blank playground and get what we have here. You can also, once you've created a playground, you can go to the Project Navigator, find your playground, and you can create what are called playground pages. Yes, this is a thing where you could have one playground file that has multiple pages to do tests, and that way you don't have to create multiple playground files. It's brilliant. I didn't know about this last week. I would have told y'all. So really a neat thing that you could do with playgrounds. There's also ways, and I have not done this, but you can show multiple. You can link to different code samples in different pages and do things like that. Okay. So let's talk about. Let's start off with. We talked about comments. So usually your file will start with some comments already in them. And to make an inline comment, we would do a // So we put 2 slashes. I would do a space, and then you could put like your name. So I'm going to put Michael Doise, and then I can press enter, and I've written a comment. So // space, and then my name. I've written a comment. That's as simple as it is. The compiler or interpreter does not see it. Now, what's the difference? Why? Okay. You're like, slow down, Michael. What's the difference between a compiler and an interpreter? The Swift compiler compiles the code to basically bytecode so it can run on a device. The interpreter runs Swift code in place, similar to a playground where you don't have to build and run it. It's kind of like Python. Python is an interpreted language. Swift can be interpreted or compiled depending on the use case, depending on what you're trying to do. So in playgrounds, we're usually doing interpreted Swift. Okay. So I can do another comment and say I want to, I'm going to do published. I do // space published :space October. What's today? The 16th, comma 2025. And I can, and sometimes just for, like if I wanted to skip a line, I could do the 2 slashes, new line, and that just keeps kind of the flow so you know that we're still in the commented area here. And then I could do // space, and then our file name, comment playground. And the reason why I did // on its own line, it keeps everything together and indented and looks good, right? So that is how we can use slashes to create comments on different lines. Okay. Now, I could also do a multi-line comment. So I could do a multi-line comment by doing /* or /*, space, and then I usually do a new line. You don't really need the space either. And that makes a new comment or a new multi-line comment. So I could do this is line 1 of this comment, new line. This is line 2 of this comment, new line. And this is the final line of the comment, period, new line. Now, one of the things you'll also see is when I did /*, Xcode immediately put a //, which ends the comment. Now, all of this information is not read by the compiler. Okay? Now, there's one more trick you can do with comments. Comments above a function can be used as quick help. They can add context to what a function or piece of code does. So what do you think that you can do to enhance the coolness of a comment if it's before a function? Well, let's see. Let's go down 2 more lines. We're going to skip 2 lines. I should be on, people following along would be on line 12 now. So I can do, again, /*, and a space. I'm going to do a new line, and I'm going to write a number sign, space. This is an example of using Markdown in comments. New line. We're going to do we're not going to put any characters. We're just going to say, did you know that you can use Markdown? Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to say, did you know that you can use * Markdown * in comments? So that made it bold, but it does not render here looking at comments. Another thing I can do is we're going to say you can, we made a new line, so you can learn more by doing a search at, and I believe the syntax for a link, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, is left parentheses, https://developer.apple.com, right parentheses, left bracket. I think it's parentheses first, then brackets. So if I'm wrong, Taylor, tell me. And in brackets, I'm putting Apple developer. Right bracket. Now, again, Becky or Taylor, if I'm wrong on that, let me know. I don't use Markdown a whole lot. So we wrote Markdown, and if I put a function below this and we looked at the quick help, which is another keystroke you can do, we would get Markdown based on this comment text. Okay, so you can do single line, you can do multi-line, and multi-line comments with Markdown to assist with help. Okay. Let's see if you guys have any questions so far about comments.
So you do have one hand.
Okay.
And I believe that is Fenton.
Hi. I was gonna follow along, but regardless of which way I did it with opening up new playground, it inserted the hello playground code on the right instead of a blank line, even though I chose blank. And I was not able to see a list of drop downs on the navigator beyond the sources and the resources. I mean, I don't see the comments list
So
that you have.
what you can do is just do a Command A and delete the content of your of what it creates.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you want to create a new playground page, you go to the project navigator, go to the very top level item, and then you could do you could do the context menu, and then tell it new playground page is what you would do.
But would I get comments and show content and variables and all that stuff that you have there?
I made these. I
Okay,
did that
gotcha.
myself.
Did you make comments then?
Yes, I created a thing that says comments. So again, you could create your own playground pages to be whatever you want them to be.
How did you create comments, may I ask again?
Okay, so again, when you go to, let's say we're on my playground, okay, I can bring up the context menu, I don't remember the voiceover command to do that, but if I bring up the context menu, I could go to new playground page, okay? And then when I do that, it says untitled page. And then I can create one that says, I can write comments here, or I can write,
I gotcha.
so we have showing comment, the content, we have comments. And do we have yeah, we have variables. Let's do a conditions. Boom, I have a new playground page.
Yep,
And
thank
when
you.
I create that playground page, it puts some code, some temporary code in here that I would promptly go and delete later on.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
So let's see. Go back to comments. So that's how that works. Any other questions?
I'm not finding any other hands at the moment.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I didn't catch all the things you were saying about the Markdown link as I was trying to keep up with you in writing things down.
No problem. Is it left parentheses and then the URL, or is it brackets first? Do you remember, Becky?
Let me just check because I have an example. So give me a minute and I will.
Yeah, I don't use it enough to remember which one is which.
I don't really use the links in Markdown enough to do that. So
Yeah. Well, we'll have an answer. Any other questions about comments before we move on? Okay. All right.
no questions. Doesn't seem right.
All right.
I'm waiting for the Markdown editor to load. So.
All right. Very good.
And the answer is it is a parenthesis, then your link.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
So
then it's brackets with the text.
the brackets come before the parentheses. So it's
Oh, really?
it's brackets, yeah. So it's like bracket text, closing bracket, then your parentheses, and then your to begin your link. That's what I have here.
Interesting. I wonder if it matters which one goes first, but that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right. So I'm going to move over to my other playground here, and we're going to talk about showing content. And I'm going to get rid of this so nobody sees the work my scratch pad here. All right. I'm going to write a comment that says / space how to show content. It's good to always put a comment at the top of each file if there's not one already to say what you're doing with this file for readability, for your sake, and other people's sake. Okay. All right. Now, let's talk about how to show content. It's very easy. We're going to say print, left parentheses, double quote, hello world. Double quote, right parentheses. So here's what's happening. We have the word print, which kind of means print to the screen or print somewhere. I guess you would say standard output for most languages. And that's going to print hello world to the error log. I could also do print, left parentheses, double quote, my name, so my space name, space is, space your name, whatever your name is. Michael, period, double quote, right parentheses. Okay, new line. try to put each command that you're writing for your program on its own line. Now, let's talk about what's happening here. Our first line, our comment, is completely ignored by the compiler. The new line that we have is ignored by the compiler or the interpreter. The two print statements are where the compiler says, ooh, I need to pay attention. This is interesting. I need to know what this is. So it parses the print statements and says, okay, I see print, I print. It prints them to the screen and puts it where it's supposed to be. Now, this is where you're going to want to have your debug area showing. And then typically, if your playgrounds are set up correctly, if you go to the debug console, as we've talked about, you should see two lines in your debug console. Hello world, my name is Michael, on different lines. Okay. So again, we are showing content. There's also another area called results that will show this information as well. It's kind of like a interactive, what are the results of what you're doing? I don't really care for the results, so I get rid of them. I just use the debug area, the debug console. I can also do, I believe this will work. I could use two strings, print, left parentheses, double quote. This is one string, double quote. Let's put space, double quote. And I should be able to add another string. So plus double quote. This is a second string added to the first period, double quote, right parentheses. So what we've essentially done, we've used the addition sign to do what's called concatenate strings together. So we've combined two strings into one based on a print statement. Okay, so technically we're using variables without using variables here. We're using two strings in one print statement. There's not a big point for doing this. I just wanted to show that it can be done. Okay, so we have print, left parentheses, double quote. This is this is one string, space, double quote, plus, you have a space, a plus, another space, double quote. This is a second string added to the first, period, double quote, right parentheses. Okay. So we have added two strings together. Now, I'm going to write something and explain what I'm doing. Print, left parentheses, double quote. This is the first string of text, because that's what these are, is a string of text. Double quote, or actually space. Make sure there's always a space between your two strings, double quote, comma, and I believe this will work, space, double quote. This is the second string, period, double quote. And Swift took it. It knew what I was doing, and in right parentheses, of course. So what did we do? We did the exact same thing, but we separated the strings by a comma. So why is that different? We took advantage of Swift having the ability to use multiple arguments in the print statement, and multiple arguments being as many strings as we wanted to attach. Okay, so that is valid as well. I would not do it this way at all, and I'm going to show you why later. Okay, so this is how we can easily print data on the screen. We're going to be using the print statement a lot in the first 7 weeks of the class. So get very familiar with writing the print statement, okay? So this is very important. If you have trouble with the print statement concept, please let me know and we will talk about it some more. I want to go ahead and see if people have questions on using the print statement.
All right. So far, no questions or hands up or anything in the chat, but let's wait a minute. Oh, now we've got a chat. Okay, so we've got a question here that says, could we turn off the type ahead? Guessing that in Xcode, and then we also have a hand raised.
Okay, let's take the hand and then we'll talk about the prediction. Jim.
All right, Jim.
I don't want to get ahead of you, Michael, so let me know if this is coming up, but I'm wondering about parameterized output, like printf, basically %s, ways of doing, controlling how wide a number will be, other kinds of things like that.
We won't really go into like the number of characters that will be displayed, but we'll talk about how to use variables in your print statements very soon.
No, right. But if I want to line up a bunch of numbers, right, so I want them all to be a certain width, can I do that kind of thing?
I have not seen that with the print statement here. I'll have to research that, but we won't be getting into that today.
Okay.
All right, we have Melissa.
Hey, Michael. So I was just wondering with the strings, did you put both of them on the same line or?
Yes, I did. I
Okay.
put inside the print statement, they are in the same line.
Okay. How do you know? I know you did the first two, you said do them on separate lines, which made sense. But how many
Comments, yeah.
strings? Yeah, the comments.
Mhm.
So when you do strings, you can put multiple on the same line.
Yes, actually, you know what? Thank you, Melissa. You are awesome. I will show one thing here real quick with that.
I'm just
So-
thinking about reading it in Braille, and I'm like, oh Lord, my sanity.
Yeah, because it will word wrap. It will do that. It will word
Okay.
wrap to the next line since you're using a Braille display.
Yeah.
And guys, indentation is very important here. It is something that is necessary. But before we go on to talk about how to turn off type ahead and the predictions, let's do this. So I'm going to make another line, and so if you're following along, this is line 8. So I'm going to write print, left parentheses, double quote. This is a string on the first line. Actually, no, I'm going to change that text. This is the first line, and then I'm going to put a backslash, which is called an escape character, and then the letter N for basically like new line. Think of it as like that. Space. This will now be on the next line. Period, double quote, right parentheses. Okay. So now we have, if you look at the code, it'll say this is the first line, and then it has, I put a space, but if you don't want a space, you can not put a space between the backslash in and then the next part. But this will now be on the next line, will be on another line because we use backslash in. So the backslash characters are what are called escape characters. I don't know nearly all of these, and I'm sure that there's a lot of them that can be used to change how your strings work. But that is the one I know about and the one that I use the most in any of my any of the code that I write. Also, if you want to make it cleaner, where it looks better, I could do print, left parentheses, double quote. This is the first line, double quote, space plus space, double quote, backslash in, double quote, space plus space double quote. This will now be on the next line. So it's the same text we did before, but the difference is we are concatenating 3 different strings. And the difference is that we have them all split because now we have the \n in its own string. So we know, hey, we do have a \n character in there. And if you're using a screen reader, it makes it a lot easier to hear than having a \n embedded in our content. Okay. Any questions about any of those things that we just talked about?
All right, Michael. Well, you do still have Margaret's iPad. Still had their hand up from last time.
Okay.
And Melissa, I didn't know if you had further questions or you just didn't put your hand down yet.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if we can, the code that you're doing now, can you put it in our class stuff?
It will
so
be
we
on
can,
it will be on the platform after class is
Okay.
over this evening.
Okay, because that way I can look and make sure I'm doing it correctly with the, okay, thanks.
Okay.
Right.
Uh,
And Margaret?
Yep.
Yeah, quick question. Is that a plus sign or a PLUS?
A plus sign.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You guys have good questions today. This is awesome.
All right.
Okay.
So far, so good. No more hands.
Okay. This is a good opportunity. I'm going to take a look in Xcode and we will see about the question that came up in chat about predictive, because it does talk a lot. I'm sure with VoiceOver. So you can go into intelligence and you could turn off coding intelligence, would stop a lot of those. Let's see. In intelligence, you can turn on there's a feature called Swift Assist that I'm not teaching just yet. And you could turn that off there. And let's see what else we have. So you could go to editor or editing. You could go to completion. And under completion, you could turn display code completions while typing. You could turn that to whatever setting you would like. Display code predictions, you could turn that off. Automatically insert closing braces, I leave that on. Close block comments, enable type over completions. So there's a lot of things you could turn on and off here. I don't know what the reformatting guide does. Automatically reformat when completing. Yeah, that sounds like a little bit like linting to me. So interesting. But that's where you go to change all of those settings. Is settings for Xcode, then editing, and then completions. Okay. All right. So now, this is the basics of how you would do showing information. You've written your first few lines of code. Congratulations. You've written hello world and you've written other code to the debug area, the debug console. Okay. So this is just the first few instructions. So let's go and I'm going to create this. I have this other playground page that I'm using called variables. Okay. And I am going to, again, go and delete everything that's here. And do / space variables examples in Swift. New line. Okay. We got our file set up now. So what can we do? Remember how I said variables are like we're storing little things in memory? Well, I can do, I can store pieces of information in memory for the length of the program, for a code block, like a function, or for the scope of a file, or many different things. The variables that we're creating right now are called global variables because they have no scope. They can be used anywhere in this file. We'll go into that more in detail later. Okay. So we can create a variable by doing one of two things. We can say, I can say let name, let space name space equals space double quote Michael. I've created a string. I have created a string that can be used for now on. I can now do something like print left parentheses double quote hello space double quote plus double quote space plus space name right parentheses. Okay, new line. Now what that should output, if you look in your console, is hello and then your name. So hello space Michael. Okay. So I have created a variable and I've added it to a print statement. So we have print left parentheses double quote hello space double quote space plus space name. And name is just the variable that we created. Now, I can also do this a little more easily. What I could do is I can now write print left parentheses double quote. So, with a capital S, so space, how are you doing, space, backslash, we got that escape character going again, left parentheses, name, right parentheses, double quote, right parentheses. Now, what did I just do there? In one print statement, without having to use a plus or anything, I've embedded my string into that text. Okay, so you can see it says so, which I probably should have added a comma after so. So let's do that. Add a comma. So, comma. How are you doing? Backslash left parentheses name, right parentheses double quote. And I should probably add an exclamation mark after the right parentheses before the double quote, because we're asking a question and, you know, we don't want to be accused of not putting punctuation. And you notice that my debug console updates every time I make these changes. You're getting interactive output as we're making changes. That's the beauty of a playground. Okay. So it now says, so, comma, how are you doing, Michael? Question mark. Okay. So we made a variable. We then printed the variable twice and gave it different information, or gave the print statements different information, different ways of displaying the information. We used string concatenation to add the variables together, the string and then the variable. And then we used where we could add variables to the print statement by using the backslash and then parentheses escape characters. Okay. Now, let's create another variable and let's call it age. So we're going to put let age equals 42. You notice I did not use any quotes. Age is an integer. Well, how does the compiler or interpreter know that? How does it know it's an integer? Well, it's because it recognizes that 42. Well, funny thing is I'm 41. I'm making myself older. Let's go change that because, you know, that's next month, but not yet. You know, it's like the song "What's My Age Again" from Blink-182. We can put an integer and it knows it's an integer. We don't have to, you know, say that it's an integer. But if we wanted to, we could say let age, let space age, colon, int with a capital I equals 41. But Swift knows that we don't need to do that. So we can just get rid of the strong typecasting. Okay. So let age equals 41. Okay. So then we're going to go down the next line. And what we're going to write is print, left parentheses, double quote, hi, hi space, backslash, parentheses, name, right parentheses, period. I see that you are backslash, parentheses, age, parentheses, years old. Okay. And that works. That's totally valid. Okay. Now, let's see. What happens if we do the other thing? So I'm going to write the same line, but I'm going to change it a little bit. Print, left parentheses, double quote, hi, backslash, parentheses, name, right parentheses, so backslash, left parentheses, name, right parentheses, period. I see you are space, double quote, space plus sign, space, age, plus, double quote, years, actually space before years, years, space, old, period, double quote, right parentheses. We get an error. In fact, we get two errors. And somebody can unmute, whoever wants to, and tell me, why do you think that this is not allowed, but our line above it is?
Type mismatch.
Say again?
Type mismatch.
Yes.
Cannot.
Yes. Type mismatch. Meaning that we are attempting to add a string, then an integer, and then a string. These two things, the strings are fine. You could add them together, but you cannot add the integer to a string. But when we use the backslash, parentheses, and put the variable in those, it makes sure that we are type safe, and it is much safer to do it that way. Okay. So,
Can I ask a question?
yes.
What happens if you replace the plus signs with commas? Does that work?
Let's find out. Let's find out if we replace the plus signs with commas. Oh, and I missed a plus sign anyway, so that wasn't going to work. Comma, and let's replace the other. Let's see. Yes, that is allowed. You can use commas to separate the items as well. So if we use commas to separate those things, that does work. I just think it's a little more readable to put everything inside of one string instead of separating them by commas. But it does work. So we've talked about two different types of variables, strings and integers. Okay. Does anybody have questions, or are you good with how these things work? And if you don't mind raising your hand if we have any questions.
All right, so as of right now, no hands are raised. Oh, Melissa has her hand raised.
Melissa.
So I just have a question about you can have the debug window thing open at the same time you have a playground open.
Yes, you can. Yep.
So how does it look? I know it sounds crazy, but how does it look on the screen, and how do you know, like with voiceover, how do you go between the two things?
So when you're in the editor area, when you're editing your code, you have to view your code that you've written, then stop interacting, navigate down to the debug area and navigate and interact with the debug console.
Gotcha.
Read it and then kind of move back and forth between. It's a
Okay.
little bit cumbersome, but it's what we have to do.
It's workable. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I was just making sure because I was like, what? Did I understand him right? Both the things are open at the same time. Okay.
Yes, they are open at the same, and I would not close them.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
keep-
No, I
keep it
understand.
open. Yeah.
Yeah, I got you. Thanks.
Mhm.
All right, and Margaret, you lowered your hand. Okay.
You still have any questions?
Yeah, I lowered my hand because I couldn't get out of that to get back to unmute because I don't have a keyboard on this right here. So my question is, when you put the notes in, can you write that line out and annotate that it's not how it's not correct? Because I copied part of it, but I didn't get all of it.
Sure. I will add I'm going to add that line commented.
Okay,
How about
awesome.
that?
Thank you.
I'm going because and guys, this is one of the things that we do in programming. When we're looking at different lines, and if something doesn't work, we may annotate it by commenting that line does not work, but we have it there for a reason. So I'm going to, while I'm here, I'm going to just select it. I'm going to paste it and comment it. And I'm going to replace the commas here with plus signs. Okay, so it will be in the code. This causes errors because I can type right. Of type mismatch. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
Not seeing any hands.
Okay. Because at this point, we're about to break your brains. All right. If we're good, let's continue. Now, what happens? What happens if later on, when we go down to where this would be the equivalent, what for me, what is line 10? And one of the things that you can do is reassign a variable. So I'm going to say age is 20. Enter. Age space equals space 20, enter. Uh-oh, I got an error. Cannot assign to variable age, or cannot assign to variable, quote, age, quote, is a let constant. What does that mean? It means that when we use let means this cannot change. You cannot change what this means. So what if I want to change the age? Well, if I know that I need to be able to change age later, then I can do that by changing it to var. But let's leave age at a var, and let's create another variable, okay? So let's do, I'm going to show an example of a longer variable name and how we write those in Swift. So I'm going to skip a line. We're going to put us on line 11, and I'm going to write var, F-A-V, or var space F-A-V, as in favorite, color with a capital C, so we're using camel case. The first word is lowercase, then any word after that is capital. That is what camel case is. So FAV color space equals space double quote blue, double quote. And I'm going to write print left parentheses double quote backslash name backslash left parentheses name right parentheses apostrophe S favorite color is backslash left parentheses FAV capital COLOR right parentheses period double quote right parentheses again, boom, done. So my last line now says Michael's favorite color is blue. Okay, so I can now blue is my favorite color, but what if it was green? I can say, then I can make a new line and say color, favorite color, space equals space double quote. It read my mind. It's predicting green. Green, quote. Print left parentheses double quote. Wow, comma, period. It looks like backslash parentheses in name, right parentheses, nope, right parentheses, apostrophe S, favorite color is now backslash left parentheses FAV capital COLOR right parentheses period double quote right parentheses. Okay, so now it looks like our output says Michael's favorite color is blue. The next line, wow, it looks like Michael's favorite color is now green. Why is that? Why were we able to reassign blue, the color, but we couldn't assign the age? It's because let is a constant and var is a regular variable. It's a mutable variable. It's a changeable variable. It means we can change the contents of this variable. Okay. So Any other questions? Any questions about that? Because I feel like that's kind of a big area there.
No question that I'm seeing at the moment.
Any questions so far? So while you think of your questions, one question a lot of people may ask, why should I use let at all? Why can't I just use var for everything? Well, it's simple. Some things don't need to change. Some things need to remain constant. And you want to make sure that those things do not change, that you don't reassign those, that they aren't something that are going to be different. Okay? So that is why we use let. For example, if I'm building an app, I can set up the colors the app will use with let variables. I can set up the image locations. I can set up specific things about the app using let constants because they will not change. Right? Now, if I'm getting content from a text field, those absolutely should be vars. So the var command keyword. Those absolutely should be that way. But there are things that can be done with let that are constants that we don't need to change. Will you see more lets than vars in your code? No. A lot of times there are going to be things that need to change, and you need to prioritize which ones need to be what. Okay. So, any questions before we start putting a little bit more of this into practice?
All right, so Melissa has her hand up, and then you also have a chat.
Okay, Melissa. Go ahead, Melissa.
Sorry about that. So if you want to, for instance, make a logo, if you have a logo for your app, which I will for both of the ones that I want to create, how would you do with an image? Would you make that, you would make that an immutable variable, right? Or how would you do an image?
Great question. So if you're loading the image from the web, I would use a let variable, and I would say something like image URL. So let image URL equals space, and then use a string to represent the URL. So double quote https:// blah, 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 whatever your image URL is. And then you would load the image using a function, another command that we'll talk about later on in SwiftUI, to load that logo into memory and put it in your user interface where you wanted it to be.
Okay. So what if it's on, I mean, I could get it from the web, but also have them on my computer. So how would you do it differently then, or would you do it differently then?
So if you're having it on your computer, you would load it into your Xcode project, and then we will talk about ways of loading that asset into your code.
Okay, cool. Thanks. This is exciting. This is good.
Excellent.
All right. And you do have a chat.
Okay.
So your chat is from Benton, and he's asking, can let or var be either global or local scope as you need?
Yes, they can. So we haven't covered code blocks yet, but yes, they can be global or local scope. Right now, everything we're creating is global, but they can be made to be local scoped as well. Okay. So let's talk about some variable types, and then we're going to wrap up for the day. Okay. We've gone over a lot of code, and next week we're going to go over a lot more. So, okay. Let's talk. I'm going to make a comment down here, and I'm going to call it types. Variable types. And I'm sure, folks, there's things I'm forgetting. I've gone over pretty much all the things that I wanted to cover today, but I'm sure there's one little thing which I'll probably remember between now and next class, and I'll cover at the beginning of next class. But let's make another comment. We're going to say // and this is on a new line. So // space strings, new line, var some string with a capital S in string equals double quote some random text double quote. That's an example of a string. So we did var some string equals, and then what we said there in quotes. That's how we know it's a string, is because of the quotes. Okay. Let's talk about, we talked about integers. Let's do var some number equals 24, just because it's a random integer. Actually, let's do some integer, not some number. Equal 24. Okay. And I'm going to put a comment between the string and the integer and put integer. Okay. And below the integer line, we're going to put // space. I believe it's double. I don't remember if it's float or double. All of them have it in different things. Let's find out. Var some decimal colon, is it double? Yep, double. So yeah, they are doubles. Equals 3.14. I'm going to put in the comment above that, doubles. Okay. So a double has a decimal point. That's how you know that's a double. And I'm going to make below that line // we're going to cover a new thing called arrays, and we'll go into more of these as we go along. And we're going to do var some array. And with arrays, we do need to know the type. Okay. So, well, actually we don't, I don't think. Let's see, equals. We can think of these as a list. We can we're creating a list. So we have item 1. So we have left bracket double quote item 1 double quote comma space double quote item space 2 double quote comma double quote item 3 double quote right parenthesis right bracket. Okay, so that list has 3 items, and then that array has 3 items, and then if I wanted to, I can print position 2 in that list. So print left parentheses double quote the second item in the array would be, and then backslash left parentheses some array left bracket, and then we give it an index starting at 0. So 0 is item 1, and So for position, the second position, we'll use item 1. So we have 0, which would be the first, 1 would be the second. So backslash left parentheses, sum array, left bracket 1, right bracket, right parentheses, period, double quote, right parentheses. And what that will do is that will print in our debug area, the second item in the array would be item 2. The confusing thing about arrays, and this is just a brief discussion of arrays, folks. The confusing thing about arrays is that the index is always starts with 0 because computers count from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3. So 0 is 1, 1 is 2, and 2 is 3. That's how that works when you're looking at arrays and lists, okay? The last primitive type we're going to talk about tonight is called a dictionary, okay? / space dictionaries, okay? So we're going to do var some dictionary. Equals left bracket, and yes, it is done with brackets. And dictionaries are done with a key and a value. So we're going to do quote teacher as the key, double quote, colon, space, double quote, Michael, double quote. So the term is teacher, also known as the key, and that's a unique thing. And then the definition is Michael, double quote, right bracket. Okay. I could also do, we could also get complicated and you could have arrays of dictionaries. And I think, let's see. And I think we can have multiple key values in a dictionary, comma, student, double quote, student, double quote, colon, space, double quote. Who should I pick on? Who should I pick on? We'll pick on Melissa today. Melissa, double quote, right bracket, to close it out. So now I have a dictionary with 2 keys and 2 values. So I can then do, I can look up who a student is by doing print, left parentheses, double quote, the student that was listed is space backslash left parentheses student some dictionary left bracket, and then we're going to give the key name, double quote, student. Okay, and you will get a warning for this, by the way. And the reason is the concept of optionals, which we're not going to go into right now. But it will come back with the student is optional parentheses Melissa. But we'll talk about what all of that means later. So we basically pulled up the information from a dictionary. But you all also notice that before that, the print statement worked. Dictionaries are just a little more complicated, and we'll get into that as we get further in the course. But these are the primitive types of variables that we're mainly going to be using in Swift. So that is all of the material that we're going to be covering today. I mean, it seems like a lot of concepts and a lot of code, but this is where we're going to be based a lot as we go along. So that is all of our material and I will be posting this on the platform this evening. So with that being said, and before I lose my voice, do we have any questions?
As of right now, I don't see any hands up, and there's nothing in the chat that could change any second.
And if you have any questions about any of the material we've gone over today, raise your hand. Okay.
Still no questions.
I will be putting up a quiz, or Taylor will be putting up a quiz to go through all of this material that we've covered today. And I have not come up with what it will be. I will be posting an assignment tomorrow to kind of talk about the different things and build a little program that will ask questions about you as a person. You'll put your information in the variables that you'll be creating, and then you'll print that content out and show it in the program. So that's going to be the two things that will be. None of the stuff is due the next week, but I urge people to complete it. It helps me know where people are struggling, what people are having trouble with, and how we can improve the course based on the quizzes and the assignment. So again, thanks, Jim, for bringing up the debug area in the console thing. That is a big help. So we can make things less confusing. I believe we do have a hand.
Yes, we do. I was just waiting for you to finish, and then I was going to let you know about that. So, Fenton.
Awesome.
Hi. The playground, once we're happy with it, what is the process to switch it to the project, or is that necessary? I guess I'm not sure. I suppose the benefit of playground is to play around, and when things are good, then you do something else. I just want to know if there's a formality to this.
Right. So when you create a playground, it's just for that, for playing around. It does not really convert into a full project. You would have to have your playground and a full project open to copy your code.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions?
As of right now, no hands.
All right, folks. I think this went pretty well for our first day of code. And I want to thank everybody for being here, everybody who's watching on YouTube. Taylor will have office hours during the weekend, or whenever she is ready to do so. I mean, if you ask her nicely, even maybe tomorrow night, who knows? But I'm really excited about this. I've been really waiting to show you all how to write code and get going with Swift. And before you know it, you'll be writing Swift UI apps. Just think.
Yes, office hours will be happening on Saturday. They were such a success that I think we're gonna keep doing them. And because like Fridays can be mixed, I think that Saturdays are definitely a huge success for the office hours. We had a lot of people. It was fun.
There you go. So
that's your answer.
Taylor will have those on Saturday. Just think, guys, 6 more lessons, and then we'll be ready to start writing Swift UI.
You guys can do it. Trust me.
We've gone through 5 lessons of this course. It's amazing how far we've come in that, or 4 lessons of the course. Sorry. It's
Sounds like
been a long
me.
day. Yeah, we'll be on lesson 5 next week. So it has been a long day. So math and me are not.
Getting
This is, and we didn't even get into some of the math things that you could do with
Oh,
numbers and things.
gosh.
We'll cover that next time. But again, we've gone over a lot of things, mainly strings and other, arrays and things like that. You're going to use that most of all when building your apps. So get good at those concepts that we've gone over, and you'll be fine.
Michael, I want to bring up a point real quick. So we have a Notebook LM, and I'm sorry about all the emails on Saturday, y'all. I was trying to get the Notebook LM, which is like a study tool from Google. I was trying to get it to be public, and it turns out that when I shared it from my work email, you can't make public notebooks. So I had to reshare it from my personal email. So I'm sorry about all that chaos. It is on the top. It will say like no topic, and then it will say Notebook LM, and you can click on it. It's public. And I will be updating that with the class from today, and you can like generate quizzes. I showed off in office hours last week. Those should be posted in the class. If they're not, actually, I don't think they are. So I'll go post those in the class, and you guys should definitely check out that. And I removed the gem because it has come to my attention that the gem, the Gemini AI thing that we had, it worked except for 2 problems. So it would ask people their grade, which was meh. But then it would ask people their school, and I was like, no, we're not having this. So that's why I removed it.
Okay. Thank you, Taylor. All right, everybody. That is this class for this time. And we'll see you all back next week. Thanks for coming again.
See you all next week.